Accessing library computer data.
Out there are no saints. Just people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Continuing our run through Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Right now we're up to the episode called The Ship, the second episode of the fifth season. Aired on October 7th, 1996. Teleplay goes to Hans Beimler. Story credit goes to Pam Wigington and Rick Kazan. Directed by Kim Friedman. In this episode, Sisko fights to keep the wreckage of a crashed Jem'Hadar fighter. It's probably one of the weaker descriptions on Memory Alpha, actually, I think, but we'll get into it. Clay, how are you?
I'm good. I feel like this is the episode that launched 1,000 fan fictions.
In terms of cleavage?
In terms of you've got the that whole interaction with Sisko in that Vorta reminded me. Do you remember the Astronaut Jones sketch from SNL?
No, I don't think so.
It was mostly theme song, but it was Tracy Morgan in this like 50s sci-fi pastiche, and he would show up and there would be these like big old, busty aliens talking to him about their planet, and he'd be like, "Yeah, sure. Yeah, yep. What's up?" And then they would stop talking and he'd say, "Why don't you slip out of that green sweatshirt and let me slap that fat ass?" And that was just the entire thing. I feel like that scene and also the interaction between O'Brien and Munez.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a big jumping off point for really anything in this episode if you wanted to write some steamy fan fiction about crew members trapped inside a hot
steamy
sweaty,
ship.
Crashed starship.
A real tight situation they find themselves in. Yeah, we'll talk about Munez. We'll talk about the cleavage of the Vorta. We'll talk about everything. We're going to be talking about the ship. So we're going to take a break, play an audio clip, and me and Claire are going to come back and we're going to break it down.
If you have something to say, say it.
Sending the Jem'Hadar into the ship was a mistake. And I apologize. I trust no one was hurt. But what choice did I have? Just like you have to protect the lives of your men, I have to protect our property. But I do hope we can put that behind us and move on.
Move on to what?
I'm sure it's obvious by now there's something in the ship we want. You allow me and my men to retrieve the item, we'll leave. You can keep the ship.
How about this? You tell me what it is you want, and I'll bring it out to you.
I'm afraid I can't do that.
Don't you trust me?
I'd like to, Captain. But I can't. Not under these circumstances. There's simply too much at stake for us.
We've got a lot at stake, too. I won't risk the lives of my crew.
It seems we're approaching an impasse.
We've already arrived.
All right. So, Clay, this is, as someone who's seen the series, or most of the series, this is a very interesting episode.
I've seen everything.
This is a very interesting episode to me. This is one of those episodes that there's two kinds of criticism you could come away from it. There are a lot of things that I think you could either, depending on how you're feeling about the word of the day, you could either nitpick or find plot holes in what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
However, in my opinion, this is an extremely strong episode that is this is almost a foreshadow of the way that the war goes. And it's not a spoiler to you. You know the Dominion War eventually happens. It will happen a little bit. But the show eventually becomes very, very, very interested in war themes and sort of the price you pay with war and the sort of morality of war and whether or not there's any sort of righteous action that can come from war. And they're not there yet. Although this one feels like a much later episode of the show in a very interesting way to me. But what did you think about the ship?
I thought this episode was great. I think this is probably one of my favorite ones I've seen in a long time. I'm curious. I wasn't really. I'd be curious what you think the plot hole things are, and I'm not saying that there aren't any. I feel like there's one kind of big one. I wouldn't call it a plot hole. I would just say it's a questionable choice.
Sure. I would say that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. The one that I'm thinking of is that I can't I was trying to figure out why. This is an instance I feel like where you've got the Jem'Hadar involved in this thing, and the Jem'Hadar are these, crazy, killers and all that kind of stuff. And you establish at a certain point that they can transport inside the ship. Why don't they all just transport inside the ship and kill everybody? They
do talk about that at the end. I was thinking the other way. Why don't they beam the founder out?
Or that too. Yeah. Either one. Yeah. I think. And also, why doesn't the founder show up on the sensors? I mean, do they not show up if they're in taking the form of a suitcase or something?
I think that is because they've said in previous that Odo becomes the thing that he says he is, so that his DNA shows up as that. But they do mention why the Jem'Hadar don't go in. They don't storm it because they don't want to risk killing the founder. Is the reason that they don't all go in with weapons? That's why the one Jem'Hadar goes in and only has a knife on him.
Yeah, I feel like I mean I guess for the point of the sake of the episode, that's easy to hand wave that, but I feel like these you send in 5 Jem'Hadar with knives, and those tired starving Starfleet guys are going to be taken out pretty quickly. And I know there is also the point of the episode is that the Vorta is making a legitimate offer to let them out of there, and so she doesn't want to have to kill everybody. And I'm not saying they would have had to kill everybody. I don't know. I just feel like if you wanted to harp on this episode about why didn't they?
Yes.
Which
there's a lot of that.
Yeah, I don't love those kinds of arguments because I feel like, as long as it's not a hand of God type, why didn't they? That's just eliminating logic altogether. I feel like you can make the case where it's just that's the decision that they made in the moment. Yeah,
I think there's two. I sort of said that as a preface to a lot of the criticism of people who don't think this episode is a very outstanding episode tend to sort of harp on those reasons as there's problems with the script. I would say that they're not really plot holes. A lot of them are stuff that you kind of have to fill in the blanks about what happened. Like why the founder dies is one of those things, and you could say it's a problem because they never outright say what happened to the founder. However, in my head, I just assumed that it also got injured in the accident that killed all the Jem'Hadar and was dying the entire time.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't think you need to explain that at all.
Right. And so they never really break down what's going on. And there's no line. I would have fixed the whole transport thing by just saying whatever this mountain the ship is stuck in is stopping the transporter from working. They can't beam people in or out of it. And that would have made sense. And then it's just things like that. They're probably not plot holes, but they are things that are either skipped over or the script is deciding not to be important. And I think that, in my opinion, this episode is so good that it doesn't matter about those things. It's not really about that. I think everything else that's going into it is so strong and so good and so interesting for Star Trek. I don't think there's ever been a Star Trek episode kind of like this. The senior officers get in a fist fight with each other, basically, about how things are going. There is something very unique about this, and I think it's a really strong thing. But if you wanted to continue what you were talking about, because you kind of jumped off into the nitpicky aspect of trying to shoot that down for me, but what'd you think about it?
Oh, no, I mean, just to continue on that a little bit, I think with certain stories, you do have, there's a hierarchy as to what's important, and I think sometimes I don't think this isn't a plot episode. This isn't a whodunit or a mystery where when you look back and if it's not one where they're trying to present a story where they're being clever, but they're cheating in the way they're being clever. That's when that stuff really tends to matter and really can take down an episode. This is a character episode. This is an emotional episode. And I'm not saying that you have to throw all logic out the door, but I think the stuff that they hand wave is completely, reasonable.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's really distracting. And if you are distracted by that, then this is not your kind of episode, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. The other thing that
I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm just meaning in general.
Yeah, the royal you or whatever.
I know you have no emotions. But.
The thing that's also funny is that on Memory Alpha, they talk a lot about the production team was actually kind of disappointed with how this episode turned out. And I understand what their criticism is, and I'll kind of feed into it as we go through the thing. But at the same time, I feel that the things that they're upset by are sort of standard Star Trek failings. So to me, it's not like they really tried to reinvent the wheel here and kind of failed at it. It's basically just the the weaknesses that pop up for them, they sort of say there's no good connection between O'Brien and Munez, is a Star Trek problem in general. So it's not like the show is ever going to get away with the fact that they have to kill off these sort of no-name characters that we don't know. Like, they can't kill off the main cast, so they're going to be stuck with these sort of red shirts in this case, or this guy's a yellow shirt, but he's a red shirt essentially. And there's a weakness of that kind of, there's a weakness in terms of having to deal with that stuff as a viewer. However, and you could even say that maybe the O'Brien stuff isn't written all that well, but I think eventually what it turns into earns this time that you spend with it.
Yeah. I think that stuff is funny because it's like, as soon as he opened his mouth, I was like, oh, that guy's fucking dead.
The opening scene where they're talking about like Ireland. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, everything with him is like a large-scale version of the cliche in a war movie where you have the one guy who pulls out the picture of his wife and talks about how he can't wait to see his best girl again. And then, obviously he's the first guy to get it.
As he peeks up out of the foxhole, the bullet just hits him smack in the forehead or something.
Yeah, or the other option is like, they have the long drawn-out thing where he's dying and he's like, this is it, Chief. Which is exactly more or less what they do here. But I think they do it to a pretty good end here, where they do that stuff because they have to build this relationship of these two characters. I mean, whether or not Munez has feelings for O'Brien other than just chief and
friendship,
subordinate or whatever, or friendship is debatable, given the way he's playing it. And I'm not making any assumptions, but he seemed like he was undressing him with his eyes in a couple of those scenes.
He calls him Poppy, I think.
Yeah.
Which I think...
Oh, no, he calls him Hefe. He calls him Hefe.
Does he call him... I thought he called him Poppy, which sounds, very... It's very...
And honestly, if the actor made that choice, good for him. I mean, why not throw some subtext into an otherwise cliche situation?
100%. I agree. I'll throw it back to you, but I agree. I think that stuff is not particularly written super well. The thing is, we've seen Munez before. He's been in a couple episodes, and they've always...
I definitely remember him.
He's only had small roles where it's like what they were trying to do is they were trying to show that the tech guys, like the engineering staff, kind of have a friendly banter with each other, and they have had that in previous episodes. Here, it feels a little bit odd because you haven't been really familiar with this guy, and it comes across as a little bit too romantically interested in each other, and like... Not that not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's like that's not the point that they're trying to get across. They're trying to relate to this friends being stuck in a war thing, and it comes across as kind of a weirder relationship than that. It's not really nailing the focus of two buddies who one of them is dying and the other one has to deal with it. It comes across as the production staff, Ira Bear, said, it comes across instead like O'Brien is dealing with a subordinate. And that's not what they wanted to come across, but that's what it is. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's terrible. I think it accomplishes it, but it's certainly not the sterling high point of the episode.
It does all kind of feel like it's two guys who just came out of the locker room, just like snapping towels at each other's naked asses.
Yes,
except one of them has a bleeding mortal wound. But I mean, which is fine. But it's like, I can see why they might be a little disappointed with the way that stuff came off, but I think it works. I think I think it falls into the margin for error of 90s TV hamminess that is acceptable. Like, I don't find it overly distracting because I think there is a benefit of hindsight where you can kind of be like, okay, yeah, maybe this doesn't totally work, but it's like you were saying, it's a trapping of the series that they've never really been able to get away from.
Right. And I don't think the best of case scenario, you're not going to be able to avoid that problem. Like, it's just a part of the series. You just have to get over that and deal with it and maybe hope for the best in terms of the writing. Maybe that doesn't deliver in that case there, but I think it's not something that really matters. So what did you really like about the episode? If you said it was one of your favorites so far.
I loved the opening sequence of them going through the ship, the busted up ship, upside down ship, and the nice horror kind of lighting and camera work they were doing, and the reveals of the dead bodies and stuff. It was kind of like Predator. I thought overall, it was It had the feeling, it reminded me of episodes like Balance of Terror from TOS, where they really get into the isolation and claustrophobia of being stuck in a place like that and what it can do to everybody else's nerves and everything.
Yeah.
I loved Worf. This might be my favorite Worf episode so far. He didn't have a ton to do, but they dropped him in at just the right points and jacked up the Klingon meter to make him, as far away from the sympathetic or empathetic O'Brien as you could put him without breaking his character.
Yeah.
And I thought the end thing too, the end confrontation when the Vorta comes back and she's like, yeah, everybody killed themselves. Sisko's like, what? She's like, yeah, they killed themselves because the founder's dead. And I failed and you failed and everybody failed. And we all kind of have to deal with the fact that we all failed because we didn't trust each other. Yeah, it's a real, as I'm getting older, I find war movies to be the most viscerally terrifying movies I can watch. Like going back and revisiting like Band of Brothers is a great show. It's an unbelievable show, but like I've been able to really put myself in the situation that those guys are in, not because I've ever been it, because it's like it's kind of like the last thing I would ever want to do.
Right.
And it becomes very real and very visceral when you think about exactly what happens in these situations. And so something like this, where they get to the end and they're really kind of giving you a realistic understanding or depiction of what happens in a wartime situation like this, where a bunch of people just got needlessly killed because two people wouldn't trust each other, wouldn't talk to each other. Yeah. That stuff hits pretty hard for me anyway these days. And I think as far as Star Trek goes, that's, this is one of the more, I would say, dark episodes they've ever done. And it's not like, what's the word? It's not existentially dark. Like, the idea of, how do you deal with the memories of being a killer cyborg now that you're not a killer cyborg anymore? It's like it's a more personal, like, dark in the sense of humanity kind of way. Yeah. Which is very against the grain for what Star Trek usually is.
The thing about this episode is that, as I mentioned at the top, they'll start moving into this war scenario. And a large part of season 5, which is the season that we're in, is sort of portraying that conflict as inevitable. A lot of it is that this is just kind of two different groups who are never going to see eye to eye, and that they have to sort of come to a head at this point. And I think what they do with that shift is that this isn't an episode that's kind of like, even DS9 did big war stuff, like Where the Warrior was a big fight scene episode. Mm-hmm. We've seen other Star Trek episodes that have been big sort of fight scenes, and when the big action battle scenes happen, it's all about the space shooting and the people running through corridors shooting each other and stuff like that. And then, at the end, there's never any reconcile about like I don't think we've ever, maybe we've seen a couple, but we certainly don't get a lot of the captains having to come to terms with the decisions that they've made at the end of the day. And what I think
when was the last time we saw anybody bleed to death from a phaser blast? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's true. And the thing about it is that DS9, this is kind of a shift, and they're moving away from that sort of action spectacle into instead being interested in what's happening to their characters who are being impacted by these stories. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's a big, big change for the series and for the franchise in general. And it's looking down this sort of like very dark, you're right, it's a super dark episode, the way that everything wraps up. Both sides have lost. And I think it does not only does it sort of show the human side of this, I think this is actually probably one of the best episodes at portraying the Dominion and how they interact with each other. I love the shot of when the founder dies and it screams. They do that pan shot outside where the Jem'Hadar and the Vorta are sort of like listening to it, sort of with a sad look on their face. It's a very interesting equal thing here where the Dominion are clearly wrong about how they sort of run their lives, but this gives them, it sort of humanizes them in a way that the previous episodes never managed to do.
Yeah, it does. The darkness of this episode too, it doesn't even really usually when they do episodes like this, there's some sort of like hopeful upswing at the end. And even in this one, the hopeful upswing is more of like a blip. It's not the most hopeful upswing. It's the first scene is Sisko having trouble writing the report because all he can think about are the 5 people who died that didn't need to die. And then Dax is like, well, I mean, if it's any consolation, they were really happy to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, thanks, I guess.
we got a lot of technology out of it. We might have saved, the argument is we might have saved 5,000 lives by having 5 people die, which is a tough thing to prove, but it's, right. I think it's just Dax trying to cheer up Sisko on a certain level.
Yeah, and even the following one with O'Brien and Worf, it's the upswing is like, yeah, he's dead, and it's sad that he's dead. I'm going to be sad with you. Yeah, it's a nice character beat. I was wondering how they were going to resolve that whole thing, because the first thing I thought they were going to do is because they do when he dies in the ship, they do like a cut to Worf. And like it's like a cut and a little bit of a pan, so it's like Worf and Dax, and they kind of cut to them and then sort of kind of focus in on Worf.
Yeah, Dax tries to step forward and Sisko holds her back, and the camera moves over to Worf.
Yeah, I thought he was going to do the Klingon death yell thing, because I knew that there was going to be some sort of Klingon thing that was going to be the resolution to their conflict, and I like this one better than if they had done the Klingon yell thing. I thought it was nice.
Well, here's something interesting. It's sort of what they do here sort of contradicts previous Klingon canon, where previously they said that once a Klingon warrior is dead, his body's just a useless shell, and they don't care about it. Is Worf lying here, or is this is he making this up to sort of accommodate O'Brien on some level? I think he could be. I mean, I think it goes either way. I think that's a decision that you can make for yourself. I think. Yeah, I think if you want to be someone who cares more about continuity holes than emotional scenes, then maybe they got it wrong and they're idiots because they got it wrong and they don't watch the show that they write. But if you care more about the way that these things work, then maybe he's just lying to him and to be nice. Yeah, I think I definitely prefer this is actually a Klingon tradition that we're going to do together and you're going to embrace. I enjoy the fact that they never outright apologize to each other. It's just kind of left simmering there. TNG, I think, would have had them apologize, like the scene after they had a fight with each other, and then it would have been going on if they even had a fight like that. Yeah. But let's talk about we can talk a little bit about the stress of what they undergo here, because the production team thought that they actually didn't sell the stress of the situation well enough. I think they're wrong about this. I think that I think that everything that what you were saying, being the claustrophobic nature of the upside down ship that they're in, like no one can sort of get their grounds going, that there's the bombings going on outside. I think all the scenes build on each other really effectively. You can see them starting to get more and more annoyed with each other as time is going on. Dax's sense of humor is actually brought into question, like how annoying someone like Dax could be if you were stuck with them for a while. It's a very sarcastic sense of humor. And they have the great scene where everything breaks down, and then Sisko yells at Dax for saying no one's laughing at you, and then yells at everybody to tell them what to get back to doing their job. I was just going to say, that scene where Sisko finally breaks and starts, be professionals, maxing out the captain level there, I thought that was great. Yeah. As far as selling it, I feel like they sell it pretty well. The one thing I might have changed is I might have visually amped up how sweaty and gross they look. Because I didn't even think about, I mean, obviously they're in the desert, but I didn't even think about how hot it was in there until he said it. Yes. And they don't do the usual thing they do in these shows where like everybody starts rolling their sleeves up or like unbuttoning their shirts and shit. And they weren't using a lot of like, not a lot of water drinking or anything going on. Or the glycerin sweat or stuff like that to make them look really sweaty. And maybe I know the scene where he meets the Vorta for the first time and she offers him food and drink. I know the implication there is supposed to be that they haven't eaten or drank anything in a long time, but I think that's the moment that doesn't land well enough. Because I know there's the also thing where he's worried about it being poisoned or whatever, but I felt like the point of that was supposed to be like, you're thirsty and hungry, don't you want to eat and drink? Yes. And I don't know if that totally landed because it happens pretty early on in the situation. Yeah, I'd agree with you because I didn't even really think about it that way. I think I see it as it's just the starts of hinting of neither trusts the other one. Sisko won't even have food with them. Works that way too, yeah. I 100% agree that it should have been used as a temptation type thing. Because what do you think about this Vorta, actually?
Like, would I go out with her?
Sexually, yes. I think that there's I was reading reviews. Some people have criticism of this Vorta performance. I really like it. I think it's in line with Weyoun. Weyoun is recalibrated what the Vorta do. And in my opinion, what she's doing is she is so desperate to get this founder back. She is coming across as kind of inconsistent in how she negotiates with Sisko. She's trying everything to get the founder back. And if it comes across as inconsistent in how she's acting, I think it's just because she's not really settled into one mode of trying to convince him. She's trying seduction with a cleavage. She's trying to she's telling him how attractive he is and how like impressive his Starfleet career is, how much she knows, trying to all these different things. And I think it's really just built around the fact that it's hiding their desperation to get the changeling off the ship. And I think it's really well done.
Yeah. The fact that she's trying, it really all goes to further the point at the end where she's trying all of the different deceitful tactics she has in lieu of actually just being straight with him. And if she had just been straight with him, who knows? If as Sisko says, like, how am I supposed to trust anything you said when the very first thing you told me was a lie? Well, if she had told him the truth right from the get-go, would he have been any more inclined to believe her? I don't know.
No, I don't know.
You know, it would have been a nice touch, like just like a visual touch, if at the end when she shows up on the ship, she had her zipper all the way up on her shirt. Because I assume that was part of the ruse.
Yes,
as you were saying.
I would think so.
But yeah,
she's wearing a turtleneck, just a very loose fitting turtleneck. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is kind of cool the way that she kind of runs through all the tricks that she knows. It's weird that she starts with the like weird sort of I'm just a ditzy new person who doesn't really do this. You know, right. That's such a strange thing to start with. That you're coming in. I don't know if that would have been the best tactic to start with, especially since you've already established these guys showing up and like fucking your ship up a little bit and like killed a bunch of people just to show up and be like, hey, hi, I'm new here. I've never done this before. I feel like you do that before you start killing people.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, she's running through all of the everything she knows except telling the truth.
And it's they have the great sort of second conversation where she's getting more and more desperate. So she says, I won't have a guard or a weapon, but you can do whatever you want. I just need to talk to you again. That's when she reveals that there's something on board that they want. And
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just think they end that really well with, it looks like we're at an impasse, or it looks like we're approaching an impasse, and Sisko says we're already there, which I think is that is a very meta line for the series at this point, because I don't want to say too much about it, but I do think that the way that this season goes with its story, this is a very important Dominion episode for everything that goes on forward, and I think they did a really good job with it. But you were going to say something, but I also wanted to just check in quick, and then you can go to your thought.
Yep.
When did you realize it was a changeling? Did you pick on that before it happened? No, okay.
I didn't pick up on it. I probably should have if I was thinking about the things that were that important to the Jem'Hadar, but I just assumed it was just, some sort of MacGuffin thing.
Data rod or something, yeah.
Yeah, some shit like that.
You know what's funny for me?
Honestly, sorry, I was just gonna. I wouldn't have been surprised if it had been like nothing. The old Maltese Falcon switcheroo.
For me, it was funny because I knew there was a changeling on board, although I didn't remember the bigger strokes of it. And I actually thought that the first time Worf yells at O'Brien, I thought it was slightly out of character, and I was wondering if the changeling had started impersonating people at that point to start to stir up dissension. Yeah. But this is a better way to go. I don't think we need another changeling turns into people and sort of plays up things. I think the naturalness of the situation they find themselves in is a better fit for this story.
Yeah, I think that's a different story. I think doing that would have been, I think it would have undercut what they were doing here, because then you can put all the blame for them acting crazy onto the changeling instead of it just being the fact that they were all acting crazy because of the situation.
Yep, undercuts that material.
Yeah. But yeah, I was going to say, The thing that's interesting, or that I question though, is what is at the end of the episode, after all's said and done, Sisko is all depressed about, the loss of life, understandably, over the fact that they didn't trust each other. What are his options in this situation? Like, what? Let's say the Vorta showed up in a very, business appropriate attire.
Yeah.
And was like, "Hey, there's a changeling on board your ship. We want the changeling back. Then we'll let you go." Is he supposed to say yes to that? Like, how is he supposed to, even if they came up and told him the truth, what reason does he have to trust anything that she says?
Nothing.
So is his frustration, is it a personal frustration, or is it a larger frustration with just like the way the world works? Because I don't know if he really has. I understand the personal frustration because he's the captain and people died under his command for this thing that seemingly, who knows what they're going to get from it. But like, as far as the way he handled it, I don't think he did anything wrong.
I think it's a larger, he's annoyed with the world kind of situation.
Yeah.
I think what the ending is really kind of neat here. I guess we should probably just stick on it for about 10 minutes before we wrap it up. But the ending from the scene where Vorta and Sisko are talking to each other, and it's revealed that if they had sort of been honest with each other, all of this sort of unnecessary death could have been avoided.
Yeah.
The founder would have been returned, the crew members would not have died, and all that stuff. It then moves into another kind of thing that I've brought up before, but there's a growing disillusionment with Starfleet.
Yeah.
Because what happens is after that's done, Dex comes in and says, what did Starfleet have to say? And he says they said good job or very good job. And he says, we're all going to get medals, very sarcastically. And Dex says, good, I'll just add it to my pile. That's in moving the series from that sort of overarching action-y sci-fi thing where Starfleet is kind of like all-encompassing and turning it into a more of a personal DS9 story. The administration and the bureaucracy of Starfleet is seen as sort of basically the politicians who send people to war and don't care about it.
Yeah.
Like they become that kind of role. And you could say the Dominion are sort of the same way, that the Jem'Hadar have been shown to be have the same sort of respect level from the Vorta and the Founders in that way. Like they're just sort of expendable death soldiers. And I think Sisko is just upset with the whole turn of events, is like that because I think I read one of the patron thoughts that think I'm going to harp on the fact that why is the Federation yet again in the Gamma Quadrant? Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about this. And I think it ties into this point, and then I'll kick it back to you about the Sisko being upset with the nature of the world. I think you have to look at it more thematically than anything. I think if you look at it on a like, why are they doing this, like factual narrative level, it doesn't really make a lot of sense why they keep going into the Gamma Quadrant. But if you look at it as just the Federation is all about expansion and sort of learning and going out there and meeting people, and the Dominion are xenophobic isolationists who want their territory and they don't want anyone else to be interfering with them. They're very fearful of outsiders. It's really just a thematic clash of those cultures. And because they're so different, that's also a reason that Sisko is upset with the whole state of things at the end, because he's kind of recognizing like, this is a very futile thing that's happening here. Like we can't come to terms or an agreement with each other.
Right. And it kind of really shows that Sisko at his core is still a quote unquote Star Trek character. And I mean that in the best way possible, doesn't it? Because his frustration is born out of the fact that his pedigree is of Star Trek. He wants to be one of those idealistic characters who are about boldly going where no one has gone before, and meeting new races and working together. And he's born of this utopic idea. And so his frustration that these things aren't going that way, I feel like is a great way to keep his character firmly in Star Trek, the concept, while the surrounding conceptual world is starting to go in a different direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they write that, I think, as that's his sort of academy story. He has a professor who gives you the the very Star Trek-y answer of like, captains just have to stay emotionally distant. Red shirts are going to die. Just be better than that. And Sisko says, well, it's one thing to say that, and it's one thing for the show and the previous series to have said that and not really cared about it, but this is a different show, and all I can think about are that these people died for no particular reason. And it's weird, and we should maybe think about that and meditate on it for a little bit.
Yeah, and maybe sometimes you meditate on that when you kill off people like, Tasha Yar with just by like a mud monster.
Most tragic character of all time.
Although Muniz doesn't get a sappy hologram speech at the end, though. So, I was thinking, does the banter that they have, Muniz and O'Brien have, does that ever occur in like real life? That like work specific banter that they always write into genre stuff, where it's like specifically sci-fi, just to sound like it's a different way of like razzing each other or whatever. Where he's like, I'm leaking more than a burst plasma coil or some shit like that. Are there people who work for like HVAC companies who every time they cut their hand, they're like, man, I'm bleeding more than a cut oil line on a something. Like, does that? I don't know if real people actually talk like that.
No, I mean, whenever I'm in like lines at a line of like a Dunkin' Donuts, and you hear like some real electricians or something come in, it's generally a little bit different. It's probably not a conversation that's appropriate for Star Trek is the problem. Yeah. Like it's a little bit more inappropriate and sort of uncouth, I guess would be the word. But I don't think no one really jokes about their job in that kind of a way. Like, you've this spreadsheet is coming undone faster than whatever you can come up with or something like that. But it's a way of, I guess it's a writer's shortcut for just sort of showing that these people like each other, is that they're very jocular with each other like that. Yeah. I don't know if it's necessary, and it comes across as I don't know. It just comes across as, I don't know what the relationship. I think it just, I think a lot of it might be born of, well, I don't know if you agree with this, that like O'Brien seems difficult to nail down as a personality on a lot of ways. Like he tends to go in a lot of directions, and I know that he's supposed to be seen as like the leader of the common man. The moment I think about was remember the episode To the Death, which is where Weyoun was in, before they all agree to go storm the planets, and the Jem'Hadar are like, we live for victory, and without victory we are nothing. And O'Brien says, I'm O'Brien and I want to live forever, so don't fucking let me die out there. And all the guys cheer. That's kind of an O'Brien moment that I suppose they're trying to latch onto here as well. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it just reminded me of something. I was in the car with my girlfriend talking about that episode and talking specifically about that scene. And she kind of brought up a good point, and she doesn't watch Star Trek, but apparently she knew enough from my descriptions to point this out. When the Jem'Hadar guy gives that speech where he says, victory is life, shouldn't they not be concerned with whether or not they live, the Jem'Hadar? Why is surviving the battle, why is that a victory for them? Are they not more concerned about winning and about the actual, like, their lives?
Yes.
They understand that they are expendable?
I think so. I think that's part of they take a pride in that not many of them live past 5 or whatever that guy says, Yeah. So I think of that like the way that we've mentioned is countering it is that the Jem'Hadar, are about anything less than a victory is a failure for the Jem'Hadar, and where the Klingons are a little bit different, where the thing of fighting is good enough for them. Like the fight is the reason to live, as opposed to the Jem'Hadar, which want victory to survive. Yeah. Is there any no, I think we talked about Starfleet's indifference at the end. I like the fact that they put Muniz in the torpedo casing, just like Wrath of Khan and stuff like that. That's a very good callback. Yeah, and it is a very good Worf episode. You see those guys actually getting to a little bit of racial insults being thrown back and forth. They get into a little bit of a fight. O'Brien continues his thing of being a terrible fighter for an ex-soldier. He's like god awful at fighting other people. Well,
I did like. Well, he's also fighting Michael Dorn as Worf, who is not exactly the best fighter. So I was happy that, at least in that one scene, they dialed down O'Brien's fighting ability to the point where Worf could easily take him out.
Yeah.
I thought that was good. I thought that was great.
O'Brien always there was that other broken link, I think, when they're on the Defiance and the Jem'Hadar board, and the Jem'Hadar gives O'Brien a titty twister to end all titty twisters. Like,
Forgot about that. Yeah.
brings him down to his knees. O'Brien always gets stuff like that thrown at him, unfortunately.
I mean, to be fair, if you don't see that coming, I don't care what situation you're in. You could be driving a spaceship. If somebody comes up and gives you a titty twister, you're going to be like, ah, what was that?
That was honestly, who throws a shoe? You fight like a woman. Anything else? I feel like I kind of hit everything that I wanted to talk about on this one. Is there anything else for you before final thoughts?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think we pretty much covered it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. If you probably recognize this location because every time they go outside to a desert place, they shoot in this little area where it's not the last time we've seen it. It's not the first time we've seen it. We're going to be back here.
I didn't recognize it specifically, but it doesn't surprise me.
The episode where we always laughed about how O'Brien and Kira just walk up to that Cardassian prison on the desert planet, and that's this area as well.
Is this also the same mountain where they go to find Garrett's?
Shakar.
No,
right?
Dukar, the daughter.
Oh, yeah, that's the same location. It's the one where Shakar, when he's running up into the mountain, and they find Bill Rawls from The Wire finds them. That's the same area.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll take a break. We'll play an audio clip. Me and Clay are going to come back, read some patron thoughts, and give our final thoughts about the ship.
What did Starfleet have to say about our prize?
They're pleased.
That's all, just pleased.
Very pleased. They're giving us all medals.
I'll add it to my collection.
Starfleet Command is waiting for my official report. But every time I try to get started, I find myself staring at the casualty list and reading the same 5 names over and over again. Talor, Rooney, Bertram, Hoya, Muñez.
It may sound cruel, but we both know that ship out there was worth it. Those 5 deaths may save 5,000 lives. Or maybe even 5 million.
And if I had to make the same trade all over again, I would. But 5 people are dead.
Okay, back with patron thoughts about the ship. If, as always, if you support the show on patreon.com/the Pensky File, a couple dollars a month, you get extra stuff, including the ability to leave your thoughts about upcoming episodes. We read them on the podcast. Zam Nuclear Wessel says the ship. One misstep in the episode is to have Dax be one of the people taking care of Munez. As science officer, she should really be working with O'Brien. They should have put Worf in charge of him, which I think would have added a lot more potential for interesting drama. One good step, Kalana. That's the Vorta. So eager to throw herself under the bus if it serves her plan. I'd call her one of my favorite Vortas, except that they're all pretty much my favorites. I don't know if maybe you can comment on that at this point, Clay. I don't know if you remember. I've mentioned before I love the Vorta species. I think they're really interesting, particularly at post Weyoun and Weyoun Returns. But I think that they are. I don't know. I think that they go further with this, but just having a species that's like middling bureaucracy. Diplomats is a really interesting role for a species to occupy, and I think they do an interesting job. I don't know if you have any thoughts about it. You don't have to go crazy with it.
No, I liked her a lot. And I like her, and I like Weyoun. I think they've both been good. I think they serve their purpose really well in that they both are very like middlemen-esque. And they handle those things in different ways. To varying degrees of success. Although it seems like in all the situations, it's always like someone saying, well, why didn't you just tell me that in the first place? Which, is fine. But yeah, I think I like them. I like that they both have, there's lots of different ways you can have that sort of character approach things. So I like it. Yeah,
it's a good, the Star Trek runs into a problem when the species have too specific of a trait. Kind of like when they're too locked into being one kind of thing. TOS did this all the time. TNG had a problem with it too. But you can see the Vorta existing as a role in the same way that the Cardassians are kind of malleable like that, and the Klingons are less so malleable. But I think it's nice to give them a broad theme, and then you can sort of branch out into different ways with it. Holly McLaughlin says, the ship, I really love this one. Bashir being arrested is hilarious and so perfectly an Odo thing to do. We didn't even talk about that scene. The efforts that Kalana make to get to the dying founder seem sincere and heartfelt, and her scenes make the Vorta seem that much more like people than they have at any point up to the series. Up to the series. What's that?
I completely forgot about that scene until you mentioned it.
Yeah, it's a pretty pointless scene. The loss of Munez lands hard. The reconciliation between O'Brien and Worf at the end is believable and touching. Neil Brennan says, the ship, I've read that the production team felt this one didn't quite live up to their hopes, and that seems fair to me. Hot Vorta, though. Bonus points to Munez for knowing so much about Ireland's topography. O'Brien boring his subordinates with geography banter sounds like something he'd do. Will Yates says, the ship, the episode seems strangely out of place in the season. There are a few too many plot holes for my liking. How could Weyoun have made a report before he was shot, and what the hell killed the founder? Kyle Barrett says, the ship...
Neither of those things matter.
Yeah, that would be my argument, I guess, as well. The ship, Kyle Barrett. I love the episode for the same reason I love the title, The Ship. On the surface, it's boring and generic, like The Battle from TNG's first season. But here it's as if the title is from Starfleet's point of view. The ship is all they, and briefly Sisko, care about and focus on, while we are offered a glimpse deeper to see the human loss behind such a strategic gain. It's an ironic dismissal at the cost of a prize of the titular ship and continued look into the Federation's darker and more arrogant side. Essentially, it's the dulce et decorum est of Star Trek titles. Or maybe I'm just trying too hard to recapture my days as a pretentious lit student, overanalyzing everything to an annoying amount when I just like the episode because of all the shooting and the shouting. Either way, I love it. That's a good point. I never actually... that's a good point about the title being a reflection of what Starfleet values as important, or what the overseers of both sides view as important when it's really about something else, more personal for Sisko and everyone else.
And I love that that you think that, and the writer of the episode who just put that in as a placeholder and forgot to come up with something more clever also appreciates that you put that much thought into it.
Half of the best decisions are probably accidents or something like that. Matthew Ross says, the ship, a nice tension-filled episode once you get past the nonsense with Quark and Bashir. Their contracts must have said that every character must be filmed, hence that useless scene. Again, why is the Federation trying to go into Dominion territory, especially with runabouts? It was good to see other aliens and people in their brief careers. The finding of the Jem'Hadar ship, the subsequent bad aiming firefights, and the desperation felt with a wounded man with his eventual demise and attempt to outlast the Jem'Hadar was well played. The Vorta was playing it a bit too conservative. After all, if they put the Jem'Hadar invisible into the ship, they could have taken out their heroes and gotten their founder back ASAP. Sisko's evident pain at the loss of his crew, O'Brien bristling at Worf's Klingon ways, even if learned by correspondence, and even Sisko's putting Dax straight were all well acted and what you would want and expect in the situation. Overall, a very good episode.
What you were saying about, sorry, this is a bit of a tangent. What you were saying about the happy accidents or, mistakes or whatever, just reminded me of, I was watching this, the documentary on Netflix about Orson Welles' final unfinished movie. And they have a clip where he's talking about it and they're asking what it's going to be like. And he says, well, all of the greatest moments in movies are happy accidents, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's never something that's on the page. It's never something you intend. It's always something that happens while you're making it. It's a happy accident. That's always what the lasting things are made of. So this film, I'm trying to make an entire film of happy accidents. And I was like, what the fuck does that mean?
It means he doesn't like the script and he's just going to shoot from the hip.
It means he's just making it up as he goes. Which, after watching that documentary, there's a good case that was probably what he was doing.
Orson Welles says, the ship, a lot of happy accidents in this episode. Actually, Christian Pouch says, the ship, this is the last comment. $5 says, Wes questions, why on earth Starfleet is trying to set up a mining outpost in the Delta Quadrant in the first 5 minutes? You know what, Christian? I read this and I didn't do it, so you owe me $5. And he'd be right. This seems like an awful provocation, no matter how deserted the area might seem. Fortunately, I think that's the episode's only big flaw. The setting is legit claustrophobic, and we feel the character frustrations of being trapped. It doesn't really make sense until it's revealed that the founder was aboard. Munez, while not being a revolutionary or inspired character, is still compelling as a nice, friendly, talented guy who died way too young. Worf sitting with O'Brien is a great way to end the episode. Side note, this is the first appearance of an updated Jem'Hadar look that will continue to evolve. It's a strong 4 out of 5, if not a 5 for me.
I was going to say they look different. There was something about them. I didn't know if it was just the photography, but they looked like they were paler and they looked a little bit more reptilian or something.
Yep. So I would say that their heads look more like flat top looking. Like they sort of they've raised their heads or something. I think they've redesigned them to be more maneuverable. And I don't know if that's
okay.
because of what they have to do in this episode, but they look lighter on their feet. Previously, they look pretty heavy sets and were sort of like armored or something, lumbering. And this one, they look more like guerrilla fighters.
Yeah.
But you're right. They do look lighter and their faces look somewhat different. I think one guy in this, the guy who brings up the food, I think has the old style makeup. He looks a little bit different than the others, but that's about it. All right, that's it. Thank you very much for your comments, guys. The ship. Clay, what are you going to give the ship on our 1 to 5 scale?
This is tough for me. I'm gonna say a very high 4.
Okay.
I feel like there's something missing from making it an all-timer, and I'm not sure what it is.
So you liked it more than you think it's good, is my takeaway. Yeah.
No, I do think it's very good. I don't know. I feel like there's something missing to it that is stopping it from putting it over the top for me.
Interesting.
What are you going to give it?
I give it a 5.
Yeah.
I think it's really one of my favorites so far. I think it has the emotional things that I always find is well done in the best episodes. I think that it has something to say about what it's talking about. I think that it does really good character work. I think everyone kind of plays things well. It has some problems where, like, as you're saying, if we could nitpick the episode, I think there's some kind of minor problems with it, but I really think it's a very strong episode for the show.
Yeah. I'm gonna give it a 5. I think.
Okay.
It's tough. I don't know. I'm not sure what it is that I'm looking for that it's missing.
Do you think it's just that's interesting because I was really expecting a 5 from you, just based on what you were saying earlier in the episode, not because of what I like sort of think you'd think of the episode. But
no, I'm not like I really wish I could tell you what it is. I don't know. I'm gonna say 5, but I feel like it's probably a low 5.
Yeah, that's fair. Because I think you would probably still at this point then, if you think that, you'd probably still put Duets as your number 1 episode, likely.
I think
something like
so,
Duet feels like more of a 5 out of 5 than this one does.
Yes, yeah.
That's fair. I think that this one might be once we're all done with the series. Looking back on it, you might think of this one as in a way that The Wire. You now seem to remember The Wire differently than when you were watching it the first time through.
About how season 2 kind of drags.
Right, exactly. About how now you look back on The Wire and you go, oh, I sort of understand the context now about that one more than I did at the time. Yeah. I think this one will be the same.
Don't get me wrong. I think it's great.
Yeah,
it's just fair. That I don't know what it is about it that is like just coming in under the wire of like all-timer for me, but I would definitely recommend it. Yeah.
Was Sisko's line at the end about if only we could have trusted each other, this could have been avoided, was that good or bad? Was that a good line or a bad line? Was it necessary?
I think it's a good line.
I think it's a good line too.
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit a little on the nose.
A little on the nose.
But not so much that I find it distracting. Like, because it's not like a long-winded thing, I don't think, and not that I remember.
No, it's not, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a quick kind of frustration, you know?
Here's something I'll throw off you, I guess. In my opinion, I probably should have brought this up earlier. This feels like something that you could really talk about, but we'll just do it now for a couple seconds.
Yeah.
In my opinion, this is possibly Avery Brooks' best performance as Sisko. I would
probably agree with you, yeah.
The Visitor is the only other thing that I'd say was a really good performance from beginning to end. This is a little bit different, and I think he plays a wider variety of emotions in this one, and he never goes over the top. He never Avery Brookses it up until a point where you're like, okay, this is just over the top. Everything feels right when he does it here. Yeah,
sometimes I feel like his over-the-topness is a result of him trying to figure out how to make what he's saying more interesting. Mm-hmm. Or like how to really kind of add some life to whatever he has to do. But in this situation, in this episode, I feel like he's figured it out. Like he knows exactly what's supposed to be going on and what level he's supposed to be at, and all of his motivations are there. And so I think he dials it up when he needs to, but he doesn't, like you're saying, he doesn't go over the top and start making any weird noises or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say this is probably, and it's, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's his best I think it's his best performance as Sisko, but it's not in a episode that is necessarily Sisko. It's not about him.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's an episode where it's like Sisko is in 95% of the scenes and it's mostly about something that has to do with him that has a better performance. Right. But if you're just talking about all of these characters being played by their respective actors, I think this is the best one. Yeah.
Yeah. It's certainly up there for me. I'd have to look at the list, but I felt while I was watching it that this one felt right for him in a way that a lot of the other ones had previously felt like there was a mistake along the way.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to give it a 5. Clay gives it a little bit more of a reserved 5, but still 5. I'll put it on the spreadsheet as a 5. And that's about it. I'll put an asterisk on that thing, I think. That's it for the ship. Thank you guys for listening. All the Facebook, Twitter, Discord, check all those out. Patreon.com/The Pensky File if you want to support the show there. A couple $1 a month, you get extra stuff. It's the best way of supporting the show. Check out all the other shows on the little channel network thing, and then you can rate and all the shows on iTunes on your phone. It's much appreciated. Clay, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, the Christmas episode of the Bat-Ass Batman the Animated Series podcast is coming out on, when does this come out?
This will probably be the same day as this podcast, so
it should be out
you can check
today.
It. Yeah, it should be out today.
Monday the something-teenth.
Monday you'll be there, I suppose, everyone listening. Monday the 17th, but for our own information, Monday the 17th.
Yeah, should be out on Monday, or today, rather. And we're doing Mask of the Phantasm and doing some question and answer. It's definitely, I call it a Christmas special because it's like 2 hours long. So it's a double-sized episode, and it should cover all of your traveling for the holiday driving needs.
Yes. Yep.
And also Night Moves 2, just the book I'm currently doing with IDW, comes out on Wednesday. So if you happen to see that on the shelves, want to grab it, that'd be much obliged.
Yeah. Well, that's about it. Guys, thank you very much for listening. We just talked about the ship for a good hour. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening to the content. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. All those things. It's not Christmas yet, but we'll just keep saying that until the holiday actually passes. That's about it. Guys, thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next time.